A man with everything. A wife he underestimated. A mistress who wanted it all. But on the shimmering waters of Miami's Biscayne Bay, one proposal built on a mountain of lies is about to crash against a truth made of glass and steel. He gathered hundreds of people on a lavish yacht to publicly divorce his wife and propose to his new love, pointing to a stunning oceanfront villa as their new home. He thought he was securing his future, a future of passion and power. He was about to find out he wasn't even a guest. He was just a trespasser on his wife's property. Arthur Vance believed the world operated on a simple principle: momentum. He was a man of perpetual forward motion. His firm, Vance Capital, hadn't just weathered market storms, it had harnessed them, turning chaotic energy into brutal, beautiful profit. He lived in a $30 million penthouse in Miami, wore a $200,000 Patek Philippe on his wrist as a simple time teller, and viewed his life as a series of successful acquisitions. His greatest acquisition, and his most frustratingly static asset, was his wife, Eleanora Hayes Vance. To Arthur, Eleanora was a portrait he had bought, admired, and then grown tired of. She was old money, the quiet, unassuming daughter of the reclusive Hayes family. He had married her a decade ago, seeing her as the final piece of his ascension. New money, his, merging with old, respectable blood, hers. But the blood ran cold, in his opinion. She was graceful, yes, elegant, certainly, but she was also quiet, terribly, maddeningly quiet. She spent her days in the corner of their sprawling, minimalist apartment overlooking the Atlantic. Her world seemed to be her laptop, her charity board meetings, and her family correspondence. Arthur saw her as decorative, a placid and predictable creature of habit. He had long since stopped seeing her as a partner or even a person. She was wallpaper, expensive, well-bred wallpaper. This Tuesday morning was no different. Arthur was adjusting his Brioni silk tie, the knot thick and perfect. He was electric, vibrating with a secret energy. This weekend was the culmination of 6 months of planning. "I'll be at the convention center in Orlando until Sunday evening, Eleanora," he said, not looking at her. He was checking his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling window. Eleanora didn't look up from her laptop. Her fingers, unadorned save for the simple gold band he'd given her. She refused the massive diamond upgrade he'd offered years ago, tapped away at the keyboard. "Orlando. I thought the quarterly review was in New York." "They moved it. Last minute." The lie slid off his tongue with the ease of long practice. "I see. Well, travel safely, Arthur." He paused, irritated by her lack of engagement. He wanted her to ask more. He wanted her to be suspicious, to be jealous, to show any sign of life. Her placid acceptance felt like another log on the fire of his resentment. "It's a big weekend. We're restructuring the main fund. It's complex." "I'm sure you'll handle it brilliantly," she murmured. A small, automatic smile. He scoffed, grabbing his briefcase. "Right. Don't wait up." He left. The heavy door clicked shut with the expensive, vacuum-sealed thud of their apartment. Only then did Eleanora Vance stop typing. She closed the laptop, which was not in fact open to a charity website. It was open to a complex asset management portal, tracking the performance of a private trust valued at just over 9 figures. She looked out the window, watching the ocean. She had known about the convention for 3 months. She had known about the yacht he'd chartered, the Odyssey for 2. She had known about the 300-person guest list, the cases of Armand de Brignac champagne, and the absurd, custom-designed canary diamond ring currently sitting in his private safe. And she knew about Serafina. Eleanora stood and walked to her private study, a room Arthur never entered, dismissing it as, where she does her little projects. On the wall was a framed satellite image, a high-resolution print of a very specific property on Star Island. It was a stunning piece of architecture, a fortress of white stone and glass that seemed to float on the turquoise water. Arthur had been obsessed with this villa for a year. He spoke of it constantly, a symbol of the next level of his success. He'd been complaining for months that the owner was an elusive, anonymous trust, and that his brokers couldn't get a meeting. He saw it as the ultimate prize. Eleonora looked at the photograph of the house she had received as a 21st birthday gift from her grandfather. Her fingers traced the outline of the infinity pool. Arthur was right about one thing. It was a big weekend. It was, indeed, complex. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. "Mr. Harrington," she said, her voice clear and calm. "He's left the building." "Yes. Please proceed with the final preparations. Everything must be in place by Saturday at sunset." Serafina Rowe lived in a state of breathless anticipation. Her apartment in South Beach was a jewel box of white leather, chrome and mirrored surfaces, all paid for by Arthur. She was everything Eleonora was not: loud, vibrant, emotionally available, and spectacularly ambitious. Where Eleonora was a watercolor, Serafina was a neon sculpture. She was 28, a former brand ambassador who had met Arthur at a party on Fisher Island. She had seen him, a shark in a handmade suit, and had known instantly that he was her ticket out of the orbit of lesser men. Arthur, in turn, had been starving for validation. Eleonora's quiet competence made him feel small. Serafina's wide-eyed adoration made him feel like a god. "He's a genius, you know," Serafina was telling her stylist, who was busy steaming a crimson, floor-length gown. "He's not just a money guy. He sees the future, and he says I'm his muse." The stylist, a man named Antoine, nodded placidly. "Of course, darling. This red is going to be magnificent against the ocean." Serafina's phone buzzed. Arthur. Her heart did a familiar leap. He's on his way. The eagle has left the nest. She smiled. The eagle. It was their silly code name for him. The nest was the cold, sterile penthouse he shared with the Ice Queen. "I can't wait to see you, my king. I'm practically vibrating. Get ready for your new life, Serafina. Everything we talked about. It all starts Saturday." She threw her phone onto the plush bed and shimmied into the red dress. It fit her like a second skin, dramatic and demanding of attention. This was her night. Their night. Arthur had explained the plan in meticulous detail. It wasn't just a party. It was a statement. He was tired of hiding, tired of living a half-life. He was going to gather everyone who mattered in his world, his partners, his rivals, the financial press, on the biggest yacht he could charter. He was going to make a speech, a toast to authenticity and passion. And then he was going to call her up. "He's going to propose, Antoine," she whispered, her reflection in the mirror looking back at her with manic brightness. "He propose?" Antoine paused, steamer in hand. "But darling, isn't he, you know, tethered?" "Tethers can be cut," Serafina said, a sharp edge to her voice. "He's handling that. He said he's ending it. This party. It's our coming out. It's his way of telling the world that I'm the one. Not her." She walked to her vanity, picking up a framed photo. It was a picture Arthur had given her, a glossy architectural rendering of the Star Island villa. "And that," she said, her voice filled with reverence, "is where we're going to live. He's buying it for me. For us. He's been in secret negotiations for months to get it. It's the most expensive property on the market." "My God," Antoine breathed. That's a palace." "It's our palace," Serafina corrected. He said he wants me to be the queen of it. He said Eleonora was never a queen. She was just a placeholder. Serafina truly believed it. She had convinced herself that Arthur's marriage was a prison, a loveless obligation to a frigid woman, and that she was his rescuer. She wasn't a mistress. She was a savior. His lavish gifts weren't transactions. They were tokens of his profound, soul-deep love. The ring, he'd told her, was a secret. He'd had it custom-made. 10 carats, canary yellow, flawless. A son for my son, he'd whispered to her last week, in this very apartment. She looked at her hand, the one that would soon hold that son. She had won. She had beaten the Hayes family. She had beaten the old money establishment that had always looked down on girls like her. She, Serafina Rowe, a nobody from Jacksonville, was about to become the new Mrs. Vance, mistress of a Miami palace. Arthur's texts were her scripture, his promises were her reality. The party on the Odyssey wasn't just a party. It was her coronation. She sprayed a final cloud of expensive perfume and smiled at her reflection. She was ready. Saturday arrived on a wave of oppressive Miami heat, the air thick with humidity and the smell of low tide. But by 4 p.m., a breeze had kicked up, scattering the clouds and washing the sky in a brilliant, preparatory blue. The marina was a forest of white masts and gleaming fiberglass. And then there was the Odyssey. It was less a yacht and more a floating monolith, a 250-foot monument to Arthur's ego, chartered for the weekend at a cost that would make a small nation wince. A red carpet ran down the dock. A string quartet was playing Vivaldi on the aft deck. Waiters in crisp white uniforms offered flutes of Armand de Brignac before guests had even stepped aboard. Arthur Vance stood at the gangway, his element personified. He wore a custom-made linen suit, open-collared, a deep tan setting off his predator's smile. He greeted his guests with hearty handshakes and back slaps. "Richard, good to see you. Glad you could make it. Senator, a pleasure. The bar is open, please. Henry, my man, wait till you see what we have planned." The guest list was a carefully curated collection of power. There were hedge fund rivals, real estate tycoons, a compliant senator, several venture capitalists, and a handful of journalists from financial papers, all lured by the promise of a major announcement. They were the new money crowd, the sharks and the barracudas of South Florida, people who respected only 2 things, wealth and audacity. Arthur was about to show them he had an excess of both. Eleonora was, of course, absent. Arthur had fielded a few token inquiries. "Where's Eleonora tonight, Arthur?" asked Mrs. Henderson, the wife of a banking rival. "Ah, tied up with her charities. You know Eleonora, always saving the world," he'd replied with a dismissive chuckle, which his circle returned. They all knew the score. They saw Eleonora as he did, a relic. At 5 p.m., the lines were cast, and the massive yacht began to move, its engines a low, powerful thrum. It slid out of the marina and into the wide, turquoise expanse of Biscayne Bay. The music shifted from classical to a pulsing, expensive-sounding deep house. The atmosphere was electric. Arthur felt invincible. Every piece was in place. Below deck, in the lavish master suite he'd claimed, Serafina was making her final preparations. She had arrived separately, smuggled aboard hours earlier to maintain the surprise. She was texting him frantically. "Is it time? Are they all there? I'm so nervous, my hands are shaking." Arthur smiled and typed back, "Patience, my love. Greatness takes time. I'll send for you at sunset. Just be ready to change your life." He put his phone away and took a deep breath, scanning his domain. 3 decks of people drinking his champagne, eating his food, all waiting for his next move. He was the director, the star, and the producer of this blockbuster. He signaled to the captain. The yacht continued its slow, deliberate path, heading for the necklace of artificial islands that housed the most expensive real estate on the planet. As the sun began to dip, painting the sky in violent streaks of orange and purple, the Odyssey slowed its engines. It came to a stop, anchoring in the calm water, just a few hundred yards off the shore of Star Island. It was positioned perfectly. To the port side, the main deck offered an unobstructed, breathtaking view of one property in particular, the glass and stone villa, the one Arthur coveted. In the dying light, the house's internal lights had flickered on, illuminating it from within like a spectacular lantern. It was magnificent. "Wow," murmured one of his partners. "Look at that place. I heard the owner is some anonymous trust, hasn't been on the market in 30 years. "Everything has a price, Robert," Arthur said, his voice smooth and confident. He tapped his champagne flute with a knife. The music faded, the chatter died down. 300 pairs of eyes turned to him. He was standing on a small, raised platform, a microphone in his hand. The golden hour light hit him perfectly. This was it. "Friends, partners, colleagues," he began, his voice booming over the state-of-the-art sound system. "Welcome. Thank you for joining me." He raised his glass. "We are here tonight to celebrate the future. We are all people who make things happen. We don't wait for permission. We don't honor traditions just because they're old. We honor passion. We honor truth. We honor authenticity." He paused, letting the words hang in the salty air. This was the part he'd rehearsed. "For the last decade, many of you have known me as one half of a stable partnership, a traditional marriage. But tradition," he leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial rumble, "can be a cage, a beautiful, gilded cage, but a cage nonetheless, a cold cage." A few people shifted, glancing at each other. This was more than a business announcement. This was drama. "I've come to realize," Arthur continued, "that life is too short to live in a gilded cage. It's too short to live without true, burning passion. It's too short to be with someone who sees life as an obligation and not an adventure." He was eviscerating his wife in public, and he was loving every second of it. "So tonight I'm breaking free. I am ending that chapter of my life. I am choosing adventure. I am choosing passion. I am choosing a partner who inspires me, who challenges me, and who loves me with a fire that matches my own." He signaled to his assistant, "And I'd like to bring her out here, right now." The crowd parted. Serafina emerged. The red dress was a slash of color against the twilight. She was stunning, her smile bright and tearful. She walked to him, taking his offered hand. The crowd erupted in a mixture of applause and shocked whispers. Arthur turned to her, his back to the villa, his face to his audience. "This is Serafina Rowe. She is my future." The air on the yacht was suddenly still. The only sounds were the gentle lapping of the bay against the hull and the distant hum of the boat's generator. The guests were frozen, a sea of shocked faces illuminated by the deck's artful lighting. They had come for cocktails and networking. They were being given a public execution of a marriage. Arthur thrived on the tension. This was power, the power to write his own narrative, to publicly declare his old life dead and his new one begun. Serafina stood beside him, her hand in his. She was trembling, a perfect portrait of a woman overwhelmed by emotion. She had dreamed of this moment, of being chosen, of being elevated in front of all the people who had dismissed her as Arthur's girl. Arthur held her hand aloft. "Many of you," he said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. will judge this. You will call it scandalous. You will whisper about propriety and duty. But I call it living. I chose to stop performing a life and to start living one. Eleonora and I, we were a business merger, an artifact. This is a soulmate. He looked deep into Serafina's eyes. She was crying now, tears of genuine joy tracing mascara down her cheeks. Serafina, he said, his voice softening, you found me in the dark. You reminded me what it felt like to be alive. You didn't want my name or my money. You wanted me. A few of the more cynical investors present barely suppressed a smirk, but Serafina's belief was absolute. She nodded, weeping. And so, Arthur said, reaching into his pocket. The collective gasp was audible. This was moving faster than anyone had anticipated. He pulled out a black velvet box. He turned, guiding Serafina so they were both facing the crowd, but more importantly, perfectly silhouetted against the magnificent villa on Star Island. The symbolism was as subtle as a sledgehammer. Out with the old, cold estate. In with the new, blazing passion. I've been planning this new life for us, my love. A life worthy of your fire. A life where we can be free. He dropped to one knee. The cameras came out. Dozens of smartphones, held by some of the most powerful people in Florida, were raised to capture the moment. This would be on every gossip blog and social media feed by morning. It was exactly what Arthur wanted. Serafina Rowe, he boomed, you are my sun, my fire, my odyssey. I'm a free man, and I want to spend the rest of my life, every single day, proving I am worthy of you. He opened the box. The ring was astonishing, a massive, rectangular canary diamond, flanked by two equally impressive white diamonds. It caught the deck lights and shattered them into 1,000 pieces. It was a statement of obscene wealth. Will you marry me, Serafina? Her answer was a choked, ecstatic sob. Yes! Oh my God, yes, Arthur! He slid the ring onto her finger. It was a perfect fit. He stood, pulling her into a kiss that was less about love and more about possession. The crowd, sensing the finale, burst into applause. The music swelled again, this time a triumphant orchestral piece. Waiters flooded the deck, refilling glasses. Arthur let Serafina go, but kept his arm locked around her waist. He turned her to face the villa. You see that, my love? He shouted over the music, pointing to the glass palace glowing in the twilight. You see our new home? Serafina stared, her hand over her mouth. Arthur, it's the one from the picture. The very one, he beamed, taking the microphone again. His guests were all watching, mesmerized. A few of my partners, he announced, know I've been trying to acquire this property for a year. The owners were difficult, an anonymous trust, playing hard to get. He chuckled. They didn't know who they were dealing with. I don't take no for an answer. Not in business, and not in life. He raised his glass. As of last week, my final offer was accepted. It's the most expensive residential sale in Miami-Dade County this year. This drew gasps of real respect. That was a serious power move. I give you our new home, he declared. A palace for my queen. He pulled Serafina into another kiss, and this time he motioned for his personal photographer. Get this shot, Miles. Her, the ring, and the house in the background. Perfect. Serafina, ecstatic, held up her hand, the yellow diamond flashing. In the background, the villa stood, magnificent and silent. It was the perfect photograph, the perfect moment, the perfect start to their perfect life. Arthur Vance had never felt more powerful, more in control, or more completely, utterly, and apocalyptically wrong. The thrum of the music, the excited chatter of the guests, the clinking of glasses. It all stopped. Not at once, but in a slow, domino-like cascade of silence that started at the stern and spread across the deck. The cause was a new sound, one that didn't belong to the party. It was the deep, throaty growl of a high-performance engine slicing through the water. Arthur looked up, annoyed. His perfect moment was being interrupted. "What the hell is that? Tell the captain to wave them off. This is a private—" His words died in his throat. Emerging from the darkness, a smaller boat was approaching the Odyssey. It wasn't a Coast Guard patrol or a lost fisherman. It was a 1960s-era Riva Aquarama, a vessel of such iconic, understated elegance that it made Arthur's mega yacht look like a gaudy block of flats. The boat was all polished mahogany and gleaming chrome, cutting through the water with the effortless grace of a swan. It slowed, idling just off the yacht's starboard side. A spotlight from the Odyssey's security detail automatically snapped on, illuminating the smaller boat. "Sir?" The captain's voice crackled over Arthur's earpiece. "There's a vessel here. They are requesting permission to board. They say they have an appointment." "An appointment? With me?" Arthur was furious. "I have no appointment. Get rid of them." "Sir, the passenger," she insists. "She says her name is Mrs. Vance." The blood drained from Arthur's face. He turned to the rail. In the spotlight he could see her. It was Eleonora. She was not in tears. She was not wearing a bathrobe and slippers, roused by a panicked call. She was wearing a stunning, tailored navy blue Armani pantsuit. Her hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon. She looked, Arthur thought with a jolt of primal fear, like she was about to liquidate a company. Beside her sat a man in a conservative suit, holding a thick leather briefcase. Mr. Harrington, her family's ancient lawyer. "Lower the gangway," Eleonora's voice, calm and clear, carried across the water. It was not a request. "Arthur, what is she doing here?" Serafina hissed, her hand instinctively covering the massive diamond. "You said you told her." "I did," Arthur snapped, his mind racing. She must have tracked me. She's here to make a scene. The crazy... Don't let her rattle you." But he was rattled. This was not the placid, defeated woman he had left in the penthouse. This was a stranger. The crew, confused and intimidated, lowered the small side gangway. Mr. Harrington stepped aboard first, then offered his hand to Eleonora. She stepped onto the deck of the Odyssey with the confidence of an owner, not an intruder. She walked directly toward the center of the party. The 300 guests parted for her like the Red Sea, their shocked, silent faces turning from Arthur to his wife. Eleonora stopped a few feet from Arthur and Serafina. Her eyes were cold, assessing. She didn't look at Arthur. She looked at the ring on Serafina's finger. "Canary diamond," Eleonora noted, her voice conversational, as if commenting on the weather. 10, maybe 12 carats. A little gauche for my taste, but it's certainly large." Serafina flushed, half defiant, half terrified. "He loves me," she said, her voice a reedy tremor. "We're getting married." "Are you?" Eleonora finally raised her eyes to Serafina. There was no anger in them. There was something far worse. Pity. "Congratulations." Then she turned to her husband. "Eleonora," Arthur snarled, regaining a fraction of his bravado. "You are embarrassing yourself. This is a private party. Get off my boat." "Your boat?" Eleonora repeated, a tiny, humorless smile playing on her lips. "That's rather the point of this discussion, isn't it? Ownership." She took a step, walking past him. She addressed the silent crowd. "Good evening, everyone. I do apologize for the interruption. My name is Eleonora Hayes Vance." She put a slight, deliberate emphasis on Hayes. I am Arthur's wife. though I see he's in the process of a rather public resignation. A few nervous titters from the crowd. Arthur, she said, turning back to him, you've always had a flair for the dramatic. A mega yacht, a 300-person audience, a public proposal. It's all very you. So much momentum. I'm calling security, Arthur threatened, his face a mask of purple rage. I wouldn't, Mr. Harrington said, stepping forward. He was a small, grey man, but he commanded the deck. He opened his briefcase. You'll want to see this, as will your partners, and I suspect your new fiancé. He handed Arthur a thick, bound document. Arthur looked at the cover page. It wasn't a divorce filing. The title was Notice of Asset Seizure and Injunction, Vance Capital versus the Hayes Family Trust. His blood ran cold. What is this? This is insane. Hayes Trust? That's your family. That has nothing to do with my company. Oh, Arthur, Eleonora sighed, walking to the edge of the deck. She looked at the glowing villa on the shore. It has everything to do with your company. You just never bothered to read the fine print. What fine print? Arthur's voice was barely a whisper. The silence on the yacht was absolute. Every guest was leaning in. Every phone was recording. The fine print on our pre-nuptial agreement, for one, Eleonora said, turning back to him. The one you were so proud of. The one your high-powered lawyers drafted to protect you from the old money leech. You were so concerned with protecting your future earnings, you barely paid attention to the clauses about marital assets and seed capital. Mr. Harrington stepped forward, his voice as dry as old paper. Mr. Vance, 10 years ago, when you founded Vance Capital, you were leveraged to the hilt. You were 3 weeks from defaulting on your commercial loans. You were, to put it plainly, failing. That's a lie, Arthur spat. Is it? Eleonora's voice cut through his. I remember it distinctly. I also remember transferring $7 million from my personal trust, a gesture of wifely faith, I believe we called it, to cover your margin calls. You told me it was a loan, and you'd pay it back. Arthur's mind was racing, trying to find the angle. I did pay it back. I paid it back with interest. You paid back the principal, Mr. Harrington corrected, but you neglected the clause my office inserted. The Hayes-Vance Capital Clause. It stipulated that the $7 million was not a loan, but a priority equity investment. An investment that entitled the Hayes Trust to a 49% stake in your holding company, Vance Capital. Should you ever, how did we phrase it, fail to act in good faith as a marital partner? Arthur's face went white. Good faith, a clause, Eleonora continued, that is triggered by, among other things, demonstrable adultery, commingling of marital funds for illicit purposes, or attempting to defraud your primary investor. You, Arthur, have just hit the trifecta, and you did it in front of 300 witnesses. Serafina made a small, strangled sound. What? What does that mean? Eleonora finally gave Serafina her full attention. It means, my dear, that the company your fiancé used to buy you that very impressive ring is, as of this moment, 49% mine. And since I am, as of my 35th birthday, the sole director of the Hayes Trust, that means I am Arthur's new boss. The collective audible gasp of 300 people was a physical thing. You bitch, Arthur breathed, lunging at her. He was stopped not by security, but by the 2 SEC agents who had come aboard with Mr. Harrington and who had been standing quietly by the gangway. They flanked him instantly. I wouldn't, Mr. Vance, one said, his badge flashing. We're just here to observe the civil injunction. Arthur froze. Eleonora hadn't even flinched. But the house, Serafina whispered, her face ashen, the big diamond on her hand suddenly looking like a prop. Arthur bought the house. He said the sale closed. It's ours. This was the moment. Eleonora turned from her husband and looked at the beautiful, weeping young woman. This is the part I truly find disappointing, Arthur, Eleonora said, her eyes now on him. You lied to her, too. She pointed to the villa. You told her you bought that house. You told your guests you'd been in a tough negotiation with an anonymous trust. Arthur, what is the name of my family's trust? Arthur's jaw worked, but no sound came out. It's called the Hayes Family Trust, Eleonora provided. It has owned that property since my grandfather, Robert Hayes, built it in 1964. It has never been for sale. It will never be for sale. She took a step closer to Serafina. He wasn't negotiating to buy it. He was trespassing. The broker he was talking to. An investigator from Mr. Harrington's firm. The offer he made. A detailed account of every dollar he's been siphoning from his company to fund his new life. Evidence, if you will. Serafina looked from the house to Arthur, the realization dawning in slow, horrifying waves. You didn't buy it. He couldn't, Eleonora said gently. It's mine. I'm spending August there. I was just having the pool retiled. The humiliation was total. It was a perfect, silent void. Arthur Vance, the king, the shark, the master of the universe, was standing on a chartered yacht he could no longer afford, next to a mistress to whom he had proposed with a ring bought with his wife's money, pointing at a house he didn't own. You, Arthur was sputtering. You were planning this. For how long? Our whole marriage? Eleonora finally allowed a single, genuine emotion to cross her face, a profound, weary sadness. No, Arthur. I wasn't planning this. I was planning a life with you. I was your partner. I was the one managing the back end of your funds while you took the credit. I was the one who quietly tripled your holdings while you dismissed me as charity wallpaper. She shook her head. I didn't viewed as charity wallpaper. I started planning this, she said, gesturing to the scene, 6 months ago. The night I found the receipts for her apartment. The night I realized you didn't just stop loving me. You stopped respecting me. You thought I was stupid. You thought the quiet, plain girl from the cold family was a fool you could drain dry and then discard. She smoothed the lapel of her pantsuit. The Hayes family doesn't get loud, Arthur. We get structural. The silence on the deck was a crushing weight. Arthur Vance stood as a statue, his face a mottled canvas of rage and shock. He was a man who had built his world on momentum, and he had just hit a wall of solid granite. Serafina, for her part, had sunk onto one of the plush deck chairs. She was no longer crying. She was just staring. She stared at the 10-carat diamond on her finger, this massive, heavy symbol of what? A lie. A joke. She wasn't a queen. She was the jester's fool. She slowly, mechanically, twisted the ring off her finger. It felt hot, radioactive. She let it fall to the deck, where it rolled a few inches and then stopped, winking pathetically under the party lights. Eleonora observed the small, discarded treasure. A wise decision. She then turned her full attention back to her husband. Mr. Harrington stepped forward and placed the heavy injunction document into Arthur's limp hand. That document, the lawyer said, is a temporary restraining order, preventing you from accessing any liquid assets from Vance Capital, your personal accounts, or any co-mingled marital funds, effective immediately. It also freezes your trading accounts. Your partners, he gestured to the stunned circle of investors, will be receiving a full prospectus from my office by morning, detailing the, let's call it, the restructuring of the company's leadership. You can't, Arthur whispered, the words thick. The company. It's me. It's my name. Your name is on the building, Arthur, but my family's money is its foundation, Eleonora said. And the foundation is taking possession. You will be offered a severance package. A generous one, I might add. More than you deserve. She looked around at the guests, these people who had been laughing at her, dismissing her just 10 minutes earlier. Her voice was strong, clear, and carried to every corner of the deck. Thank you all for coming to my husband's going-away party. I trust you've enjoyed the champagne. He certainly has a taste for the finer things. She walked back toward the gangway, her posture perfect. The 2 SEC agents, their work done, followed her. Eleonora, wait! Arthur's voice was desperate, a plea. It was the first time in years he had said her name with anything other than disdain. She stopped, but she didn't turn around. What am I supposed to do? He asked, a small broken sound. Eleonora paused, looking out over the dark water toward the lights of Miami. I don't know, Arthur. Perhaps you should try living authentically. I believe those were your words. She glanced back over her shoulder, her eyes finding his in the dark. You wanted a new life. You wanted to be free of your cold wife. You've gotten your wish. You are now, officially, free. She gave a curt, polite nod to the captain. Captain, please ensure Mr. Vance and his guest are safely returned to the marina. Mr. Harrington's office will settle the charter bill on Monday. She then descended the gangway with the same unhurried grace with which she had arrived. Mr. Harrington followed. They stepped onto the mahogany reaver. The engine roared to life, a sound of controlled, elegant power. The 300 guests on the Odyssey watched as the small boat carved a phosphorescent wake in the bay, heading not back to the marina, but directly toward Star Island. They watched as it docked at the private pier of the magnificent glass villa. They watched as the lights on the dock came on, and as the small, powerful figure in the navy blue pantsuit stepped onto her property, disappearing into the light. On the yacht, there was silence. The party was over. The music was dead. Arthur Vance was left alone in the center of the deck, holding a legal document that had just erased his life. Serafina finally moved. She stood up, barefoot, her red dress looking cheap and garish in the sudden, harsh quiet. She looked at Arthur, her eyes empty of adoration, empty of everything except a cold, hard understanding. She didn't say a word. She simply walked away, heading below deck to find her purse, just another asset to be discarded. Arthur didn't watch her go. He was still staring at the house, a kingdom he had tried to steal, only to learn he was never even in the game. The villa, the mahogany reaver, the haze, idled perfectly as it slid into the boat, slip beneath the villa. The sound of its engine was a soft, contented purr, a stark contrast to the thrumming, anxious heart of the mega-yacht it left behind. Eleonora stepped onto the dock. The air here was different, cleaner, fragrant with night-blooming jasmine that snaked up the stone columns. Mr. Harrington followed, carrying his briefcase. The villa's lights were on, casting a warm, honey-gold glow onto the white stone patio. It was not a fortress, Eleonora thought. It was a home. Well, Mr. Harrington said, the first to speak since they'd left the yacht. I believe that went according to plan. Eleonora walked into the main salon, a vast, 2-story room with a wall of glass overlooking the bay. In the distance, the Odyssey was still anchored, a dark shape punctuated by too many lights, like a gaudy, dying beetle. She went to a simple bar set into a teak cabinet. She ignored the crystal decanters of whiskey and brandy. Instead, she opened a small refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of still water. She poured it into a plain glass. "Your grandfather would have been very proud, Eleanora," Mr. Harrington said, allowing himself a rare, thin smile. "Robert Hayes always said, 'Never play your hand until you've already won.'" He also said, "The loudest man in the room is the weakest," Eleanora murmured, taking a small sip. The water was cold. It grounded her. She was not triumphant. There was no joy in this, no giddy rush of victory. There was only the profound, bone-deep weariness of a battle concluded. For 6 months, she had lived a double life. Her quiet days of charity work, a perfect cover for a campaign of meticulous, brutal financial warfare. Every email she sent, every call she made, was a chess move, repositioning her family's assets, insulating her trust, and laying the legal groundwork to decapitate Arthur's empire. "The injunction is ironclad," Harrington continued, all business once more. "The trading accounts were frozen at 5:01 p.m. Eastern. The partners are receiving their notifications as we speak. The first wire will detail the Hayes Trust's emergency invocation of the 49% priority equity clause. The second will be a call for an emergency board meeting, Monday at 9 a.m., with you as interim chair." "And the penthouse?" she asked, not turning from the window. "The locks are being changed. His key fobs, his access codes, all deactivated. His personal effects will be packed by a bonded service and sent to a storage unit." "And her?" Harrington's expression was neutral. The South Beach apartment lease was in a shell LLC, funded directly from Vance Capital's discretionary account. That LLC is now frozen. The lease will be terminated for non-payment. She will have 48 hours to vacate. Eleanora nodded. "Total, structural." "And the SEC agents?" "They were very observant," Harrington said. "Arthur's public declaration of gifting the villa, a non-existent, unpurchased asset, to his new fiancée in front of investors after claiming for months that he was in negotiations to acquire it. It's not just adultery, Eleanora. It's wire fraud. It's market manipulation. He was using the rumor of that acquisition to inflate the perceived value of his personal brand, and by extension, his fund. They will be very interested in his trading records from the past 6 months. She had known all this. She had planned it. But hearing it laid bare in the quiet of her grandfather's house made it feel real and terrible. "He built a company, Mr. Harrington," she said quietly. "A real one, under all the lies, under the ego. There was something real there once." "And you funded it, Mrs. Vance," the lawyer countered, his voice firm. "You saved it, and now you have reclaimed it. What you do with it, dissolve it, run it, sell it for parts, is entirely up to you. You are, for the first time in a decade, your own woman." Eleanora looked at her reflection in the glass. The quiet, mousy wife was gone. In her place was a woman she barely recognized, a woman in a power suit, with eyes that had seen the blueprint of her husband's betrayal and drawn a better one. She was the new monarch, and the crown felt impossibly heavy. The yacht back on the Odyssey. The silence was a disease. The string quartet had packed up and fled on a crew boat. The guests had evaporated, melting away in a silent, mortified mass, catching rides on whatever tenders could be summoned. They didn't say goodbye to Arthur. They avoided his gaze as if he were a leper. His social and professional destruction had been so total, so absolute, that they were terrified to be caught in the blast radius. Arthur stood alone on the deck, the humid night air pressing in on him. The document was a damp, crumpled ball in his fist. He was shaking, a low, adrenal tremor. This was a nightmare. He would wake up. His phone, which he'd left on a table, began to buzz. It was Robert, his former partner. He stared at it. It buzzed again. Henry, then a text from his lawyer, a string of frantic question marks. He's blocked my accounts. The thought was so absurd, he almost laughed. She blocked my accounts. Eleonora. He could see the lights of the villa across the bay. He could almost imagine her inside, laughing, drinking champagne with her ancient lawyer, the ice queen, the wallpaper. She had been a ghost in his life for years, and now he realized he was the one who was dead. He heard a sound, a footstep. Serafina. She was not the tearful, ecstatic woman from an hour ago. Her face was scrubbed of makeup, her eyes red-rimmed but cold. She was wearing simple black slacks and a t-shirt, her crimson gown presumably bundled in the duffel bag slung over her shoulder. She was all sharp edges and coiled rage. "Serafina," he said, his voice hoarse. He took a step toward her, his hand outstretched, a drowning man grasping for a piece of driftwood. "Baby, listen to me. This is a misunderstanding. A corporate takeover. It's illegal. We can fight this. Our lawyers—" "Shut up." Her voice was flat, dead. "Just shut your mouth, Arthur. I don't want to hear another lie. It's not a lie. She's a vindictive—" "The house!" Serafina's voice cracked, rising. "You lied about the house. You stood there, in front of all those people, in front of me, and you pointed at another woman's home, her home, and you called me its queen. You made me your prop in your stupid, pathetic war with your wife. A war you lost. I did it for us," he pleaded, the lie sounding thin even to his own ears. "I wanted to give you everything. You wanted to show me everything," she corrected, her voice dripping with a venom he had never heard. "You wanted an audience. You wanted someone to adore you. You didn't want a soulmate, Arthur. You wanted a mirror, and I was stupid enough to reflect you." She walked past him to the crumpled ring still lying on the deck. She stared at it. "A son for your son," she whispered. She kicked it. The massive diamond skittered across the deck and disappeared over the side with a tiny, unsatisfying plip into the dark water. Arthur gasped. That was $12 million. "It was hers," Serafina hissed. "It was never yours to give. Just like the apartment. Just like the car. Just like everything." She turned to him, her face a mask of cold clarity. She was a survivor. She had attached herself to a shark, believing he would protect her. Now she saw he was just a remora, attached to a far greater predator. And that predator had just shaken him loose. "I have one question," she said. "The apartment. Is the lease in your name?" Arthur's silence was her answer. "Right," she said, nodding to herself. She slung her bag higher on her shoulder. "Captain," she yelled toward the bridge, "I am a guest on this. Is this boat? I demand to be taken to shore. Now. Alone." "Serafina, don't do this," Arthur begged, grabbing her arm. "Where will you go? You have nothing." She wrenched her arm free, her nails digging into his skin. "I've always had nothing, Arthur. The difference is, now I know it." She looked at him one last time. This man she had worshipped, this god who had been revealed as a hollow statue. "You didn't just lose your money, Arthur. You lost everything. Because you had everything. You had a woman who was a queen, and you threw her away because you were too stupid and too arrogant to see it." She turned and marched to the gangway, where a crew member was dutifully lowering a tender. The marina. The long, slow ride back to the marina was a journey through hell. The Odyssey was no longer a symbol of power. It was a barge of shame. The crew, now just doing their jobs, avoided him. They docked. The red carpet was gone. There was no one waiting. Arthur Vance stepped onto the solid ground of the marina. His linen suit was wrinkled, stained with a drop of champagne. His phone was buzzing, a frantic, useless brick in his pocket. He tried to call his driver. The call went straight to voicemail. He'd been cut off. He tried to open his Uber app. Payment declined. He laughed, a short, sharp, hysterical bark. The senator, the hedge fund managers, Serafina, his wife, all gone. He was a king an hour ago. Now he was a man who couldn't even pay for a taxi. He started walking. He had no destination. He was a man of perpetual forward motion, with nowhere to go. He walked out of the marina, his expensive Italian shoes echoing on the concrete. He reached the main road. The city of Miami, his city, sparkled around him, a paradise of light and wealth that was no longer his. He looked across the black water of the bay. He couldn't see the villa, but he knew she was there. Eleonora, his wife, the wallpaper, the ghost. He had built his entire life on the principle of momentum. He had just learned, in the most public and brutal way possible, what happens when you underestimate the object you've been pushing against. Sometimes it doesn't just stop you. It pushes back, and it crushes you completely. He had spent his life acquiring things, only to realize, in one catastrophic night, that the only thing he'd ever truly owned was a $7 million loan from his wife. And the interest, he now understood, was everything. What a story. Can you believe the audacity of Arthur and the absolute, ice-cold brilliance of Eleonora Hayes Vance? She proves that the best revenge isn't loud, it's structural, it's legal, and it's total. What do you think Arthur and Serafina did next? Where do you go after a humiliation that public and that complete? Let us know your theories in the comments below. If you love stories of epic twists, poetic justice, and powerful women who refuse to be underestimated, then you have come to the right place. We hunt down the most incredible real-life dramas and bring them to you every single week. So, if you haven't already, don't forget to show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with a friend who loves a good revenge story. And most importantly, click subscribe and ring that notification bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next.